Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. Chief Dominic Okoro sat quietly on the veranda of his enormous mansion in Lekki Phase 1, watching the sunset through the tinted lens of his reading glasses. At 73, his bones ached, and his heart was heavy, not from illness, but disappointment. He was a self-made billionaire who started from selling spare parts under a makeshift wooden kiosk in Onitsha to building a multi-million naira empire that included real estate, logistics, and oil services. His legacy was vast, his influence undeniable, and his properties spread across the nation. But now, the only thing that troubled his aging soul was the growing arrogance and reckless behavior of his three biological sons, Raymond, Felix, and Junior. These boys, raised in wealth and privilege, had begun to treat his empire like a playground. They hosted wild parties, posted their father's wealth online to gain followers, and spent millions in a weekend with no concern for where it came from or what it meant. What stung even more was that despite all their extravagance, none of them had shown any real interest in learning how to manage the empire he built with blood and sweat. They weren't involved in board meetings, had no clue how the logistics department operated, and couldn't balance a basic financial report. Instead, they basked in the illusion of eternal wealth and chased vanity as if life owed them indulgence. On several occasions, Chief Dominic had tried to have conversations with them, heart-to-heart discussions meant to realign them with purpose and responsibility. But all he received were empty nods, fake promises, and mocking behind closed doors. "Papa won't die yet," Raymond once whispered to Felix, unaware that the old man's driver overheard. "Let's enjoy ourselves first. When he's gone, we'll restructure everything our way." That comment haunted the old man. His empire, his name, his legacy, all of it, was in the hands of children who cared more about bottle service than boardroom service. But not all hope was lost. Chaik, the boy he adopted when the child was just 9 years old, had grown to be the opposite of everything his sons represented. Chaik was calm, reserved, loyal, and full of quiet intelligence. He studied business administration at Unilag on a scholarship and returned to work in the company without asking for a kobo. He stayed in the background, managing logistics, mediating staff conflicts, and solving problems others ran away from. Yet he was treated like an outsider by the same brothers he once played with as children. They mocked his presence, laughed at his ideas, and often dismissed him as the charity project. Chief Dominic watched all of it, the insults, the marginalization, and the humility with which Chaik still smiled and greeted them brother. And that was when the idea struck him. If his biological sons were blinded by entitlement, and the only one who showed true concern for his life's work was the one who owed him nothing, then maybe it was time to test where true loyalty lay. He would do something none of them saw coming. He would die, at least on paper, and see how each one reacted to his absence. Chaik had never known the comfort of a real home until Chief Dominic took him in. As a street child roaming the motor parks of Ojuelegba, begging for food and sleeping on cartons, his life had been a story of survival and silence. When the chief met him at a charity outreach 20 years ago, he was just another ragged boy with sharp eyes and dirt-stained dreams. No one expected Chief Dominic to adopt him, but something in the boy's composure stood out. Chaik never begged for food that day. Instead, he offered to help the cooks organize the plates, quietly assisting others. That selfless act caught the billionaire's attention, and just a month later, Chaik was moved into the mansion as part of the family. But in truth, he was always treated differently. The staff respected him more than the brothers did, but even their courtesy came with limitations. Felix, Raymond, and Junior saw him as a project, a reminder that they weren't good enough sons for their father, and they hated him for it. As the years went by, Chaik proved himself worthy of every opportunity given. He studied hard, graduated with first-class honors, and voluntarily started working at the family's logistics firm. He wasn't placed in an executive office like the other sons, but started from the bottom, delivering goods, balancing waybills, and staying up late to review stock discrepancies. His humility and patience didn't go unnoticed by the staff, who slowly began to rely on him more than they did the flashy, spoiled sons. Yet, this only fueled his brothers' resentment. They mocked him openly, accusing him of trying to outshine them, calling him names like Oliver Twist and Daddy's Little Driver. Many times, Chaik was excluded from family trips and events. He once returned from a supply run to discover that the family had traveled to Dubai without informing him. Yet, he never complained. Whenever Chief Dominic asked about the trip, Chaik smiled and said he had work to do, protecting the man from knowing how cruel his other sons were becoming. Still, Chaik remained close to Chief Dominic in ways the others never could. While the biological sons came only when summoned or needed money, Chaik visited the old man daily, checked his medications, and even sat through his long stories of past business deals and betrayals. Chief Dominic began to rely on him, trusting him with files and secret account passwords. It wasn't favoritism, it was recognition. Chaik was the only one who truly listened. Yet, Chaik never took advantage of this closeness. In fact, he would always bow in greeting, call Chief Sir even in private, and never accepted money unless it was related to business needs. The irony was painful. The son who had nothing was the one who acted like he had everything to lose. Chief Dominic began to ask himself deep questions. What truly makes someone your child? Blood or behavior? And as the days passed and his biological sons spent more time online flaunting cars and women, he began to realize the answer was becoming clearer. He had one true son, and he wasn't born into the family. Chief Dominic paced his study late into the night, the shadows of the room dancing against the dim chandelier above. The decision was heavy, perhaps even risky, but he couldn't continue to sit and watch his legacy crumble into the hands of spoiled children. He called his trusted lawyer and longtime friend, Barrister Martins, who arrived past midnight. Over a bottle of palm wine and a file filled with altered documents, the two men discussed a plan to fake the billionaire's death. It would not be theatrical. There would be no fake car crash or staged attack. Instead, the chief would be declared dead from a heart attack, with forged hospital records and a silent cremation plan. The will would be unread until after a 60-day mourning period. His wealth would be handed over for temporary control to his three sons, with hidden conditions in place. In the meantime, he would watch everything unfold from a safe house just outside Ibadan, equipped with security cameras, wiretaps, and access to all company transactions. His staff was divided into two groups, those who were loyal and those who were clueless. Only his lawyer, his estate manager, and his longtime nurse were informed. Everyone else, including Chaik, would be left in the dark. That way, he could observe their raw and unfiltered responses to his death. Barrister Martins hesitated. "Chief, this is extreme. What if something goes wrong?" But Chief Dominic shook his head. "Let me tell you something, Martins. Death has a way of revealing truth. If my sons are truly who they pretend to be, they will prove it when I'm no longer here." And with that, the wheels of the plan were set in motion. That weekend, the news broke: Chief Dominic Okoro was dead. The headline screamed it: "Billionaire oil magnate passes at 73. Condolences poured in from across the nation. Business partners cried on camera. But what the cameras didn't see was the champagne that was popped in the private living room of the Okoro mansion by three sons who had just become instant millionaires. Chaik received the news with deep shock. He cried uncontrollably, not just for losing a father, but for the years of love and guidance he would no longer have. While the others planned exotic getaways and started partitioning properties before the burial, Chaik refused to eat. He sat in Chief's favorite chair and held onto his photo, unable to accept the loss. The funeral was arranged in just 5 days, quiet and exclusive, just as the chief had wished. His ashes, a pile of ceremonial white sand, were lowered in a golden urn while his sons stood emotionless, already on their phones. Chaik, unaware of the trick, gave a tearful speech, promising to continue the values his father instilled in him. In a small apartment near the edge of Ibadan, Chief Dominic watched the broadcast with watery eyes. His sons showed no sign of sorrow, no respect for tradition, and no depth of feeling. But Chike was mourning like a real son would. Now, the old man muttered, let the real test begin. The moment the 60-day holding period began, Raymond, Felix, and Junior pounced on their newfound riches like wolves who had been starved for too long. Felix moved into a 7-bedroom penthouse in Banana Island, installed a marble jacuzzi, and began dating an Instagram influencer with over 500,000 followers. Raymond bought 3 new cars, including a bulletproof G-Wagon, and threw a morning party in Port Harcourt where he was seen spraying dollars on dancers. Junior, the youngest, decided to invest in a music label, claiming he had always had a passion for Afrobeat. They began withdrawing funds, firing long-term staff, and hiring their friends to replace them. The once structured empire started to feel like a reality show. Their late father's face was still on the company's brochure, but the values he stood for had already been buried. Amid the chaos, Chike tried to advise them. He noticed declining sales reports, unpaid bills, and bounced contracts. He approached Raymond first. Brother, we need to renew the warehouse licenses and restock the ABA facility. Things are slowing down, he said. But Raymond laughed in his face. Who gave you mouth in this house? You are adopted, remember? Know your place. Felix was worse. Chike, he said while lounging in a pool. You see this water? That's where I drown all your suggestions. Let us enjoy money in peace. Junior didn't even bother answering. They left Chike in charge of the smallest courier branch, one that had been due for closure, and refused to give him funding to run it. He used his own small savings to pay the delivery drivers and ensure the branch didn't collapse. Workers, who had once reported to the brothers, began turning to Chike for help. They knew he had no power, but he still found ways to solve their problems. Some even offered to work for free just because they believed in him. Meanwhile, the lavish lifestyles of the brothers began to spiral out of control. The company's board issued warnings, but the brothers dismissed them. We are the owners now, Raymond declared. Old systems are out. Staff salaries were delayed for 2 months. Warehouses began closing, and international clients began canceling contracts due to lack of communication. Chike tried to intervene again, but was locked out of the corporate email system. They made sure to humiliate him in every way possible. At one point, Junior publicly slapped him during a board meeting when Chike questioned the decision to sell one of the family's factories. Chike left the room bleeding from the lips, but still bowed and said, "Thank you, brother," before walking away. Back in his Abaddon safe house, Chief Dominic watched in disgust and heartbreak. The sons he raised had become vultures, and the only one who still treated his name with dignity was the one who owed him nothing. They buried me with a smile, the old man whispered. But I'm not done yet. The once lively Okoro mansion had transformed into a den of noise and decadence. Female guests in revealing clothes lounged in every corner. Alcohol flowed like water, and security guards now doubled as bouncers during the sons' extravagant parties. Chike, who used to dine at the family table, now took his meals alone in the kitchen or sometimes retreated to his small room in the boys' quarters, where a thin mattress and wooden chair were all he had. He had tried to maintain peace, but his brothers ensured his humiliation was complete. They locked his wardrobe, mocked his thriftiness, and even threw out some of his clothes in front of the house staff. "You're lucky we let you stay at all," Raymond scoffed one evening. "This is our father's house, not your orphanage." Chike didn't respond. He had long learned that silence sometimes carried more dignity than argument. But even in this new status of invisibility, he swept the compound every morning, watered the garden their father once loved, and continued showing respect to all, even those who laughed at him. Despite the maltreatment, Chike's loyalty to Chief Dominic's legacy never wavered. He went to the office every day, his small branch in Aja that was almost forgotten. With limited resources, he reorganized delivery routes, rebuilt trust with frustrated clients, and even brought back 2 loyal partners through persistent effort and phone calls late into the night. He trained new recruits using old manuals and sourced second-hand delivery bikes through a family friend. Staff who were fired by the 3 brothers slowly began seeking him out, offering to volunteer or work with reduced salaries. His honesty and work ethic reminded them of what Chief Dominic had once stood for: integrity, discipline, and compassion. Chike poured himself into the work, often skipping meals just to make ends meet. At night, he prayed not for wealth, but for strength and clarity. "God, let me not disgrace the man who gave me a second chance at life," he whispered to the ceiling of his small room. Unknown to him, in a quiet surveillance room outside Ibadan, Chief Dominic wiped tears from his eyes. Chike's humility baffled the mansion staff, many of whom had become indifferent due to the son's arrogance. "This boy has no pride," the old gardener once murmured. "They treat him like trash, but he still greets them 'Good morning, sir.'" Meanwhile, the other sons treated the staff like slaves. They yelled orders, canceled leave days, and deducted salaries for no reason. Yet Chike never once retaliated. When a housemaid was accused falsely by Junior of theft, Chike investigated quietly and proved her innocence. When Raymond's car caught fire due to careless wiring, it was Chike who called the emergency unit and personally pulled out the panicking driver. Still, the brothers saw his actions as manipulative. "He wants to win sympathy," Felix growled. But their father saw it differently. "He's being who he always was," Chief Dominic whispered to his lawyer. "Even without inheritance or respect, he protects what I built. That's a real son, not the ones who wear my name-like costume." Raymond Okoro had always seen himself as the rightful heir, the eldest son, the face of the family, and the one who, in his words, was born with wealth in his blood. After their father's death, Raymond took the biggest chunk of the assets, claiming it was his role as firstborn to control the legacy. He became a regular on social media, posting motivational quotes and flaunting luxury cars, club appearances, and celebrity girlfriends. He boasted of being the next face of Okoro Global, even though he hadn't attended a board meeting in months. But his fall came faster than he anticipated. It started with an affair with the wife of a prominent state senator. What began as a private fling soon turned into a national scandal when photos and videos leaked online. Raymond denied the affair, but the evidence was overwhelming. The senator threatened to sue for defamation and harassment, and companies began pulling out of deals with Okoro Global due to reputation concerns. The aftermath was brutal. Raymond's business accounts were frozen pending investigation, and his lifestyle took a nosedive. The friends who once rode with him in limousines stopped answering his calls. The influencer girlfriend dumped him on a live stream. Suddenly, Raymond went from posting flashy videos to borrowing money from his brothers. He returned to the mansion a shadow of himself, drinking heavily and yelling at staff who avoided him like a plague. Yet even in his disgrace, he found time to insult Chike. One afternoon, in a drunken rage, Raymond confronted him. "This is all your fault. Your bad luck. Ever since you came into this house, nothing has worked for me." Chike, who had just returned from delivering employee uniforms to one of the few remaining branches, said nothing. He looked at Raymond's red, swollen eyes and the stench of whiskey on his breath, then sighed. "I'm sorry for your pain, brother, but we all make our choices." He turned and walked away, leaving Raymond shouting into the air. Chief Dominic, still in hiding, watched every moment of his son's downfall. The footage from the house showed Raymond's steady decline, from cocky prince to disgraced pauper. But what broke the old man's heart wasn't the scandal or the financial loss. It was the hatred Raymond showed even in weakness. There was no remorse, no growth, no awakening. Just blame. Chike, on the other hand, had visited a staff member who was sick, paid her hospital bill, and brought her family groceries, all from his own pocket. One son lost his dignity, Chief Dominic murmured. The other never needed riches to show his character. It was becoming clearer now, the lines between inheritance and legacy, between blood and worth. The storm was only beginning, but one thing was certain. Raymond had fallen, and only the proud could fall that hard. In the thick of betrayal, humiliation, and hardship, Chike held onto kindness like a compass. He believed that integrity wasn't something to be displayed when praised, but something to hold onto when tested. That belief was put to the test when Raymond's scandal nearly caused a bank to pull funding from Okoro Logistics. Chike, despite having no authority, approached the regional manager and pleaded for an extension. He presented documents, offered collateral with his own land certificate from the small house Chief Dominic gifted him 5 years earlier, and promised to repay in installments. The bank agreed, not because they trusted the company, but because they trusted Chaik. The funds helped to pay part of the warehouse workers' delayed salaries and prevented the shutdown of the one remaining supply chain that was still active. Chaik never mentioned this sacrifice to his brothers, nor did he expect to thank you. His focus remained on preserving what was left of Chief Dominic's name. One evening, as the rain poured heavily and the mansion's roof leaked in places due to neglected maintenance, Chaik found Junior arguing with a supplier over phone. The supplier had refused to deliver more goods until old debts were cleared. Junior hurled insults through his phone and screamed at the housemaids like they were the cause of his frustration. Chaik stepped in calmly, picked up the phone, and apologized to the supplier. "Give me 3 days," he said. "I'll sort out what's owed. I give you my word." Junior rolled his eyes and walked away. 3 days later, Chaik sold his only piece of inherited jewelry, an old Rolex Chief Dominic once gifted him, and paid the supplier. When the goods arrived, Junior took the credit and paraded himself as the family savior. Chaik said nothing. The mansion's chef, an elderly woman named Mama Ifioma, watched all this and shook her head. "You're more of a son than they'll ever be," she whispered to Chaik as she served him a bowl of gari and groundnut, the only thing he could afford that week. Meanwhile, Chief Dominic watched in silence. The security footage captured everything. Chaik patching torn uniforms, carrying heavy boxes, and enduring insults with grace. "They call him adopted," the old man said to Barrister Martins, "but he's the only one who's inherited my spirit." What none of the sons realized was that their father had embedded hidden clauses in the control documents. Every expense, every misuse of funds, every action was being recorded, and a pattern was forming. The biological sons were destroying what they inherited. Chaik was preserving what he never expected to own. With each passing day, the line between heir and betrayer sharpened, and the old man, though pretending to be gone, was quietly preparing for a return that would shake their world to its core. The mansion that once stood as a symbol of Chief Dominic's discipline, wealth, and legacy had turned into a chaotic nightclub. Every night was louder than the last, with guests pouring in from all parts of Lagos, socialites, slay queens, fake businessmen, and online clout chasers. Raymond, now slightly rehabilitated from his scandal, had returned with even more reckless vengeance. He invited DJs, had women flown in from Dubai, and posted videos of his escapades under the tag #OkoroLegacy. Junior wasn't any better. He used the mansion for music videos, sometimes hiring over 50 extras to dance around in vulgar outfits while he pretended to rap with gold chains. Felix became obsessed with gambling, bringing in shady people who hosted poker nights and underground bets in the guest wing of the house. No one respected the old house rules anymore. No smoking indoors, no loud music after midnight, no outsiders in the prayer room. All those principles were discarded like trash. The house staff began quitting, one by one. Mama Ifioma, the elderly cook who had served the family for over 30 years, resigned tearfully after Junior accused her of poisoning his food simply because she refused to serve alcohol. The head gardener left after Felix's gambling friends beat him up for refusing to open the compound gate fast enough. Even the security guard, Uncle Lamy, once a former soldier loyal to Chief Dominic, walked away quietly one morning, shaking his head in disappointment. Chaik remained the only person trying to maintain the house. He would wake up early to clean the compound, tend to the garden, and sometimes fix broken water pipes with his bare hands. The guests laughed at him, calling him houseboy with ambition, but he kept his focus on keeping a piece of the old man's legacy intact. It wasn't easy. Some nights, he would cry silently in his small room, overwhelmed by the disrespect, the noise, and the feeling of being unwanted in a home that once felt like salvation. Back in his hidden safe house, Chief Dominic watched in dismay. Every corner of the mansion had hidden cameras, and what he saw tore him apart. His once peaceful home had become a shrine to vanity and destruction. He saw girls passed out in his late wife's prayer room. He saw Felix gambling away millions on a card game. He saw Junior mocking his framed portrait. But what struck him most deeply was seeing Chike sweeping vomit off the staircase one morning, wearing torn slippers and still whispering good morning to the maid who ignored him. Chike, despite having no share, still cleaned up after the mess the real heirs made. "That boy is carrying my soul," Chief Dominic whispered to Barrister Martins, who sat beside him, equally heartbroken. "And the ones I gave my blood to? They've turned my temple into a brothel." It became clear now. This test was working. He didn't need to announce a new heir. He just needed to let truth reveal itself, because real sons don't wait for inheritance to act like family. Felix had always believed himself to be the most business-minded of the Okoro brothers. He often bragged about reading financial blogs, watching investment videos, and once attending a 2-day online course titled How to Multiply Your Wealth in 30 Days. When the temporary inheritance came into his hands, he immediately poured 200 million naira into a dubious cryptocurrency venture run by a flashy Nigerian-American named Duke, a man known more for Instagram photos with celebrities than actual results. Felix ignored all warnings and criticisms. Even Chike, who had caught wind of the scheme from some former staff, tried to talk to him. "Brother," Chike said respectfully, "please vet this company properly. The documents look inconsistent." Felix responded with a cold laugh. "You? Are you giving me financial advice? The boy who eats Gary with groundnut? Stick to your delivery branch, Mr. Logistics." A month later, Duke vanished, with every kobo. The fallout was swift and severe. Felix began receiving threats from other investors he had convinced to join the scheme. One of them, a military general's son, threatened to drag the entire Okoro family into a legal war if his funds weren't returned. Felix began liquidating assets desperately. He sold a fleet of company trucks, then moved on to one of the warehouses in Ibadan. That decision caused ripple effects. Supplies were halted, drivers lost jobs, and a key client canceled their long-term partnership. The logistics arm began to suffer, and without adequate funding, deliveries delayed and staff revolted. Chike tried to calm the chaos with apologies and small stipends from his savings. He even begged a former supplier to resume services under his personal name. Meanwhile, Felix sank deeper into depression, now hiding in his room and refusing to answer calls. His brothers blamed him for their growing problems, and yet none of them accepted responsibility. Chief Dominic watched the implosion unfold like a tragic drama. He could no longer count the number of companies that had severed ties with Okoro Global since his death. But what baffled him most was the selfishness of it all, how none of the sons paused to think about the empire their father built from nothing. They used it like a faucet, not realizing that even gold runs dry. Yet, in the middle of the collapse, one man still stood. Chike, in his worn-out clothes and soft-spoken ways, continued managing what little remained. He organized emergency staff meetings, comforted drivers whose salaries were delayed, and started handwriting thank-you letters to loyal clients, something Chief Dominic hadn't seen in decades. "Martins," Chief Dominic said one night as he watched footage of Chike carrying sacks with junior workers. "It's not about who owns the name. It's about who honors the name. And that boy, he honors me more than my own flesh." The company's reputation was now hanging by a thread. News outlets had begun picking up on the growing collapse of the Okoro Group, questioning the management of the sons and their competence. Shareholders were pulling out, investors were demanding accountability, and workers began protesting outside the Aja and Surulere branches. Amid all this, Chike quietly continued managing the decaying remains of the empire. He took on roles that should have belonged to full departments. He became accountant, HR, delivery supervisor, and customer care all at once. He sometimes slept in the office and woke up with swollen eyes, eating plain bread and water while trying to balance account sheets. But he never once abandoned ship. When the Aja office generator broke down, Chike fixed it himself. When a client in Abuja threatened legal action due to unfulfilled orders, Chike traveled there in person, spent 2 days explaining the situation, and returned with a restructured agreement that saved the company from a lawsuit. It was during one of his supply runs that he heard Mama Ifeoma, the former cook, had fallen sick and couldn't afford her hospital bills. Without hesitation, Chike transferred money to her son and even visited her at the local clinic with food and medicine. She wept upon seeing him. "You're not just Dominic's son, you're his soul," she whispered through tears. That single sentence filled Chike's chest with warmth. No one had ever said such words to him. For years, he felt like a shadow in the Okoro mansion, a placeholder, a favor. But now, he was becoming the very heart that kept the name beating. While his brothers were hiding, gambling, or clubbing, he was mending what they had broken. Still, they mocked him behind closed doors. "Chike wants to be hero," Raymond scoffed, drunk again. "Let him. He'll die trying. We'll inherit it all in the end anyway." But they didn't know that their father was watching, every word, every failure, every betrayal, and that their inheritance was already bleeding into the hands of the one they called outsider. One evening, as Chike was locking up the office, he found a letter under the door, handwritten and signed. It read, "You're doing well. Very well. Just keep going. Your time is coming." He stared at the note, heart pounding. Was it from an old staff? A secret admirer? Or something bigger? He didn't know. But for the first time in weeks, he smiled. He folded the letter and kept it in his wallet. Far away, in the hidden Ibadan estate, Chief Dominic smiled too. "He's ready," he said to Barrister Martins. "He has passed the test. Now I must prepare to return, not to punish, but to restore. And this time, I won't make the mistake of choosing blood over truth." While Raymond was struggling with addiction and Felix sank into silence after losing millions, Junior was consumed with ambition, a dangerous and unfiltered hunger for fame. He had convinced himself that becoming a celebrity would save the family name and restore their influence. Using what remained of his share of the inheritance, Junior launched a record label called Legacy Sound, renting luxury apartments, hiring young producers, and paying influencers to post about him. His first single, a poorly produced track filled with auto-tuned boasts about money, went viral for all the wrong reasons. Memes spread. Blogs mocked him. The billionaire rapper who can't rap became the new headline. But Junior didn't care. He believed all publicity was good publicity. Desperate for attention, he staged giveaways online and invited women from Instagram to party at the mansion, some of whom he didn't even know by name. But the real betrayal came when Junior tried to fix the company's failing image, not through strategy, but through lies. In an attempt to raise capital for his music dream, he approached an international investor and lied about the company's financials, using forged documents and claiming that Chike was the new CEO. "He's our manager," Junior told the investor. "He handles operations quietly, but we're the faces." The lie worked temporarily. The investor wired a deposit of 100 million naira for a logistics expansion deal, expecting a board meeting and documentation to follow. But nothing came. Weeks passed, and when the investor tried to reach the company, no one answered. Furious, he sent legal notices and contacted the local business bureau. Chike only found out about the scandal when a journalist called him to verify the deal. Stunned, he confronted Junior, asking why his name was on forged paperwork. Junior smirked. "You should be grateful. You finally matter in this family." The incident brought police attention to the company. Chike, although innocent, spent 2 days answering questions at the station. He explained everything, presented evidence, and was cleared, but not without personal cost. The shame of being dragged into a fraud case shook him. Meanwhile, Junior went into hiding. Rumors swirled that he had fled to Ghana. The investor sued, and the company's stocks plummeted further. More clients pulled out. And once again, it was Chike left to clean up the mess. He called emergency meetings with remaining staff, contacted suppliers to renegotiate deals, and even sold his old car to keep the company's internet and electricity bills paid. Chief Dominic watched it all with trembling fists. Fraud. My son committed fraud in my name. And Chike, the one they rejected, took the blame, he said to Barrister Martins. "This has gone too far. Their hearts are rotten. It's time to shake their world before they bury my legacy completely." Chief Dominic was a man who believed in legacy, not just wealth. When he first discussed the idea of faking his death, Barrister Martins had insisted on creating a backup plan, a legal safety net in case things spiraled beyond control. That plan was the hidden will. It was a legally binding document, drafted and signed before his death, sealed in a private safe, and set to be opened only under certain conditions. Conditions that were now being met. The will explicitly detailed the division of assets based on loyalty, responsibility, and character. A video clip accompanied it, recorded by Chief Dominic himself, explaining why he made the decision to test his sons and how he intended to reward or punish them based on their actions during his absence. "A name is not inherited," he said in the clip, "it is earned. My bloodline will not destroy what I built. My legacy belongs to the one who carries my spirit." The will outlined everything: property, company shares, offshore accounts, real estate, and even intellectual rights. It left the lion's share, 85% of all assets, to Chaik, not because he was adopted, but because he had proven himself worthy. The remaining 15% was to be split among Raymond, Felix, and Junior as a form of mercy, with strict clauses attached. They could only access it if they agreed to resign from all company roles, undergo public apology campaigns, and commit to 6 months of community service under Chaik's supervision. Any attempt to contest the will would result in total disinheritance. Barrister Martins was to read the will only after Chief Dominic revealed his return, or in the case of his actual death. But now, Chief Dominic decided it was time to take the first step in that return. He called his estate manager and began planning a private re-entry into Lagos. "Let's not announce it just yet," he said. "Let me step into their world one last time, while they think the crown is still theirs." That week, a rumor spread among high circles that Chief Dominic had been seen boarding a private flight from Ibadan. Bloggers speculated about a fake death. Others dismissed it as conspiracy. But inside the mansion, the brothers panicked. Felix began receiving anonymous letters about truth surfacing. Raymond heard whispers among staff about the rightful heir. Chaik remained unaware of the will, still working like a slave, cleaning the mansion after yet another of Raymond's parties. He often stared at his father's portrait and whispered prayers, wishing he had just a few more days with the old man to thank him properly. Little did he know that man was very much alive and watching him closely. In just a few days, the masquerade would end, and the truth would walk through the gates of the mansion like thunder after a long drought. The king was coming home, and the sons who thought they inherited the crown were about to kneel before the boy they called servant. It was a bright Monday morning when a long black Range Rover slowly rolled into the compound of the Okoro mansion. The security men, 2 new hires who had never met the old chief, stood confused as the tinted windows rolled down. Chief Dominic stepped out, dressed simply in a white kaftan with dark shades and a silver walking stick. He looked older, slimmer, but his presence was unmistakable. "Where's Raymond?" he asked calmly. The guards stood frozen. "Call him. Call all of them." Chaos followed. Raymond ran down the stairs shirtless, thinking it was an imposter. Felix came out from the poolside, jaw dropped, speechless. Junior returned home an hour later after being dragged back by a driver who saw him on the mainland. One by one, they stared at the father they had mourned, buried, and betrayed. None of them spoke first. Chief Dominic removed his glasses and looked at them with piercing disappointment. "Is this what you did with my name? Is this what I died for?" The brothers stammered, fell to their knees, and began sobbing, each trying to blame the other, each trying to act surprised, each trying to spin their own story of sorrow and regret. But Chief Dominic raised his hand. "Spare me the acting. I have watched you every day. Every lie, every theft, every slap you gave Chaik, every bottle you popped over my grave." He turned to the staff. "Where is Chaik?" At that moment, Chaik walked into the compound carrying files, unaware of the storm brewing. He froze when he saw the man standing at the center of the compound. The man he had cried for. The man he had served without complaint. His eyes filled with tears instantly. He dropped the files and ran forward, falling to his knees. "Papa," he whispered. Chief Dominic lifted him up and embraced him tightly. "You're not my adopted son, Chaik. You are my son, the only one who made me proud." The entire compound stood still. The staff began whispering, some even cheering. Tears flowed freely. Chike stood trembling, overwhelmed. But the brothers turned pale, rage and regret fighting for space in their faces. So this was all a game? Raymond shouted. You lied to us? But Chief Dominic's face remained hard. No. You lied to yourselves. I didn't fake my death. You faked your love. Now it's time for judgment. He motioned to Barrister Martins, who stepped out of the car with a leather briefcase. Let's read the will. The brothers gasped. A will? Already? They thought they had time, thought the house was theirs. But as the lawyer opened the case, flipped through pages, and began reading, they realized too late that the real heir had always been the one they despised. The mansion was silent, except for the sound of truth crashing down like thunder over spoiled sons, and a faithful servant turned king. As Barrister Martins began reading the contents of the hidden will, the compound fell into a tense, reverent silence. The lawyer cleared his throat and started with the late chief's recorded video, a solemn message from Chief Dominic himself, pre-recorded before his stage death. The screen flickered, and the chief's face appeared, older but firm. If you're watching this, his voice echoed through the mansion courtyard, then I am either dead or have chosen to return because truth must be seen and judgment must be passed. He spoke directly to his sons, exposing everything. How he faked his death, how he watched them squander his legacy, how they humiliated Chike, and how every act was captured and archived. The sons couldn't look him in the eye. The footage played next. Raymond spraying dollars on strippers at a morning party. Felix boasting to friends about using company funds for gambling. Junior lying to investors and using Chike's name to commit fraud. There were gasps from staff. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others shook their heads in shame. After the video ended, Barrister Martins began reading the will. To my sons Raymond, Felix, and Junior, I leave you each 5% of my total estate, to be accessed only under the following conditions. Public apology to the Okoro staff and board. 6 months of supervised community service under the management of Chike Okoro, and permanent relinquishment of all decision-making roles within Okoro Global. The three brothers began murmuring protests, but the lawyer raised a hand. Any refusal or challenge to these terms will result in total disinheritance and legal separation from all holdings. Then came the shocker. To Chike Okoro, who has honored my name with sweat, humility, and loyalty, I leave 85% of all assets, properties, businesses, intellectual rights, investments, and international holdings. Chike will assume the title of chairman and CEO of the Okoro Group, effective immediately. The words struck like lightning. The staff burst into applause. Some cried openly. Chike stood frozen, unable to comprehend what he just heard. Chief Dominic placed a hand on his shoulder. You earned this, my son. You did not inherit it. You proved you deserved it. Raymond leaped up in anger. This is betrayal. He's not even your real son. You've chosen a stranger over your own blood. Felix shouted, You think you can erase us with papers? Junior began cursing and hurling insults. But Chief Dominic didn't flinch. He looked each of them in the eye and said, Blood made you my children, but your actions proved you were never sons. You buried me with your greed. You mocked me with your lifestyle. You hated the one person who lived out the values I raised you with. Now you want the reward? No. Chike stood where you fell. And as long as I live, I will never reward betrayal over loyalty. The brothers turned to the staff, but no one stood with them. They turned to each other, but only guilt remained between them. The empire they thought they owned was gone, transferred not by force, but by character. And no wealth in the world could reverse what had just happened. The next morning, legal papers were served to Raymond, Felix, and Junior, documents stripping them of access to all company accounts, personal staff, and property titles that were previously under their names. The lawyers made it clear. Their father's decision was final and protected by layers of legal security. They were to vacate the mansion within 5 days or face legal action. Chike, who now held the title of chairman, didn't gloat or parade his new status. He quietly moved into the upstairs office, once occupied by Felix, and began meeting with department heads to start repairing the damage. The mansion, once filled with wild music and drunk laughter, now became a place of sober business and strategy. Chike invited the old staff back. Mama Ifioma returned to the kitchen with joy in her eyes. The gardener was reinstated, and Uncle Lami resumed his post at the gate. One by one, the people who truly cared for the legacy returned, inspired by Chike's humility and renewed vision. The brothers, however, fell apart. Felix tried to stage a comeback by leaking false stories to the media, claiming Chike had manipulated their father. But the public wasn't fooled. The video of the will had gone viral, and Chike's quiet suffering had touched many hearts. Raymond attempted to rally old friends to protest on his behalf, but none of them wanted to be associated with a man who had become the face of disgrace. Junior tried to revive his music label using remaining cash he had stashed away, but he was banned from using the family name, and his sponsors pulled out, fearing association with scandal. One evening, Chike was informed that Junior had attempted to sneak into the mansion with thugs, intending to reclaim a few valuables. Security stopped him, and when confronted by Chike, Junior spat on the ground and yelled, "This isn't over." Chike looked at him with sadness, not anger. "It is over," he said softly. "You just can't accept that you lost to someone you thought was beneath you." In truth, the real battle had never been about inheritance. It was about values. Chief Dominic watched as Chike made thoughtful changes to the company, revising employee welfare, reopening closed branches, and investing in community outreach. Chike didn't flaunt wealth or seek revenge. Instead, he focused on building a name that meant something. "A real man doesn't inherit a name," he once told a group of staff. "He builds it." Meanwhile, the brothers fell into deeper crisis. Raymond began drinking again, Felix moved in with a distant cousin after losing his house to debt, and Junior disappeared from public eye. They now lived like shadows, no longer the kings of the empire, but echoes of the arrogance that destroyed it. And as Chike walked through the mansion hall one evening, looking at the portrait of Chief Dominic beside his late wife, he smiled faintly. "Thank you, Papa," he whispered. "You gave me a home when I was nothing. I hope I've made you proud." The humiliation was unbearable for Raymond, Felix, and Junior. They had gone from being Lego socialites and self-proclaimed heirs to being ridiculed in the same streets they once dominated. On social media, memes flew like wildfire. How to lose $1 billion in 60 days, the Okoro Brothers edition. At clubs they once owned VIP sections in, they were now ignored or laughed at. Old girlfriends, who once clung to their arms, now blocked them. Even former friends refused to pick their calls. Rage festered inside them, especially Raymond. He felt the most entitled, the most wounded. "That bastard Chike ruined us," he seethed one evening, pacing in the guest room of a friend's duplex. "He stole our father's love, our company, everything." Felix, nursing a hangover, grunted. "We should have thrown him out when Papa brought him home. We made a mistake tolerating him." The anger boiled over into violence. In the dead of night, the three brothers snuck into the compound with masked thugs, intent on teaching Chike a lesson. Their plan was crude but dangerous. Beat him, destroy company documents, and force their father to reverse the will out of fear. They didn't realize Chief Dominic had already upgraded security. As they made it past the back fence, security alarms blared. In a desperate attempt, Junior lunged at Chike with a metal rod when he emerged from the main house, alerted by the noise. A sharp blow landed on Chike's shoulder, but before another could follow, guards rushed in and tackled all three brothers. They were arrested on the spot, caught red-handed with weapons. Chike was rushed to the hospital with a dislocated shoulder and bruised ribs, but he survived, again, silently bearing pain caused by the same people he had once called brothers. The next morning, the media exploded with the news. Okoro sons arrested for attempted murder of new heir was plastered on every headline. The story shocked the nation. Interviews poured in, sympathies flowed toward Chike, and public respect for Chief Dominic soared. At the police station, the old man walked into the cell where his sons sat in shame. He didn't shout or curse. He simply looked at them and said, "You were not disinherited because I didn't love you. You were disinherited because you chose hate over honor. This is not about wealth. This is about what you became." As he walked out, the three men finally broke down, tears of defeat, regret, and bitterness flowing uncontrollably. But it was too late. The kingdom was gone. Their crowns had been crushed by their own hands. And Chaik, wounded but still standing, became the symbol of grace, humility, and what it truly means to be a son, not by blood, but by choice and character. The days that followed the attack were heavy with reflection and transformation. Chaik spent 2 weeks in the hospital, surrounded by love and admiration from people who had once ignored him. Flowers poured in from grateful staff members, business partners, and even strangers who had been touched by his story. Social media campaigns like #RealSunchaik and #OkoroLegacyRestored trended for days. The hospital staff treated him like royalty, though Chaik remained his humble self, greeting every nurse with warmth, praying with janitors, and thanking everyone who stood by him. Chief Dominic visited him daily, sitting beside his bed with tears in his eyes. "My son," he would say, "I should have protected you better." But Chaik always shook his head gently. "You gave me the best life anyone could ever give. You gave me a name. I just wanted to be worthy of it." And in that moment, father and son, though not of blood, shared a bond that not even time could weaken. Meanwhile, back at the company, massive changes were underway. Chaik's return to the helm was anticipated with hope. The board officially confirmed his appointment as CEO, and his first acts were bold but compassionate. He called back all staff who had been unjustly fired by his brothers, reinstated their roles with increased salaries, and introduced a mental health program for workers. He slashed his own salary, restructured debts, and reopened the previously closed ABA and Port Harcourt branches. Chaik also launched a new project, Dominic Foundation for Orphans and Widows, a social initiative inspired by his own journey, aimed at giving abandoned children the same chance he had been given. The media hailed him as a revolutionary leader, and shareholders, once skeptical, reinvested with confidence. The company that had once stood on the brink of collapse now surged toward new heights, all because one man had decided not to be bitter, but better. Chaik's leadership extended beyond business. Every Sunday, he visited orphanages and retirement homes, sharing meals and listening to stories. When asked why he still lived in the boys' quarters despite owning multiple mansions now, he responded, "The room where I learned discipline will always mean more than the house where I was insulted." But eventually, Chief Dominic intervened. "Son, I want you to move into the master bedroom. You are the head of this house now." It took some convincing, but Chaik finally moved in, not with fanfare, but with a prayer. As he stood before the portrait of Chief Dominic and his late wife, he whispered, "Thank you, Mama. I never met you, but I hope I've honored your memory." That night, as Chaik sat on the same balcony where Chief Dominic had once wept over his sons, he felt peace, a deep, powerful peace that only comes to those who choose forgiveness over vengeance, humility over pride, and legacy over luxury. Under Chaik's leadership, Okoro Global didn't just survive, it thrived. Within months, dormant partnerships were revived, international investors returned, and new technology-driven systems were introduced across all branches. Efficiency skyrocketed, and with it, trust. But more importantly, the company culture changed. Employees no longer worked out of fear, but from pride and belief in the vision Chaik carried. Every staff member, from the drivers to the executives, was given a voice, and Chaik personally mentored junior managers to grow beyond their comfort zones. His office became known as the Open Door, a place where no one needed an appointment to speak their mind. When the company reached its first Billionaire profit since his appointment, Chaik hosted a Thanksgiving, not in a luxury hotel, but at the orphanage where he was once found by Chief Dominic. He shared his story to a crowd of weeping children, telling them, "Don't let the world convince you that where you start is where you'll stay." Chief Dominic, now fully retired and spending his days at a quiet countryside villa, watched proudly as Chaik handled the affairs of the company with wisdom and grace. He had never seen his empire so organized, so respected, and so deeply rooted in values. "He didn't just protect my name," the old man said to Barrister Martins one evening. He elevated it. During a high-level summit in Dubai, Chaik was named African Businessman of the Year and received a standing ovation from leaders across the continent. But even with all the glory, Chaik never lost his grounding. He still returned every month to the hospital that had treated him, sponsoring surgeries for needy patients. He still wore simple clothes to the office, ate with the staff in the common canteen, and refused to change his driver, insisting that the man who drove me when I was nobody deserves to drive me now. Meanwhile, the story of the Okoro brothers became a cautionary tale across the nation. Universities began using their downfall as case studies in business ethics classes. Past friends avoided them, and all attempts to recover socially failed. Raymond tried launching an online clothing brand, but failed due to bad reputation. Felix attempted a real estate firm, but got arrested over fraudulent property sales. Junior, who had disappeared for a while, resurfaced in a local bar, overweight and drunk, performing music to earn spare change. Not one of them could crawl out of the pit they dug for themselves. But Chaik never spoke ill of them, even when others did. When asked during an interview if he hated them, he simply said, "I don't hate anyone. But I learned that family is not what you call people. It's what people prove to be." That single sentence trended across platforms for weeks. In a world full of greed, Chaik had become the emblem of grace. It was 2 years after Chief Dominic's stage death when Raymond returned to the mansion, not as an heir or a guest, but as a beggar. His clothes were worn, his eyes hollow, his gait slow. He had come to ask for help. Life had dealt him heavy blows: debt, lawsuits, addiction, and the humiliation of irrelevance. He stood outside the gate, unsure if anyone would even recognize him. But to his surprise, it was Chaik himself who came out to see him. No bodyguards, no hostility, just the same calm smile. Raymond fell to his knees. "Forgive me," he wept. "I was blind. I was stupid. I threw everything away." Chaik helped him to his feet. "You didn't throw it away," he replied. "You gave it to me, and I'll honor it by not letting you starve." He invited Raymond in, gave him a meal, and offered to sponsor his rehabilitation. But he also set boundaries. "I can forgive Raymond," Chaik said gently, "but I won't enable." Word got out, and soon Felix came too. Then Junior, broken and barely recognizable. Each one asked for forgiveness, each one with their own brand of regret. Chief Dominic allowed them back into his life, but not into his company. "Love and mercy are 2 different things," he told them. "I love you still, but the crown was never yours." He funded their healing, gave them small startup loans under strict mentorship, and told them to start over, not as Okoro princes, but as men who must rebuild their dignity from scratch. They hated the conditions at first. They wanted restoration without discipline. But as time passed, they realized that Chaik had not been lucky. He had been consistent. He earned every step. Regret burned in their hearts. "We had everything," Junior once whispered to Felix, "and we lost it because we couldn't respect one man's humility." But it was too late to change the past. The future now had a new name, and it was Chaik Okoro. One afternoon, Chaik stood at the graveside of Chief Dominic's late wife, laying fresh flowers on her tombstone. The sun filtered through the trees, casting a gentle glow on the marble. "Mama," he whispered, "thank you for letting Papa find me." Behind him, Chief Dominic stood quietly, his cane in hand, pride beaming from his eyes. "She would have loved you," he said. Chaik turned and smiled. "I hope I made her proud." The old man nodded. "You've made us all proud." In that moment, as birds chirped and the wind rustled through the leaves, Chaik knew he had not only survived betrayal, pain, and rejection. He had transformed it into strength, grace, and a legacy that would outlive the name on any paper. The servant had become the son, and the rejected stone had become the cornerstone of an empire. The official celebration of Chaik Okoro's leadership came on the 3rd anniversary of Chief Dominic's stage death, the day that it started it all. A grand event was hosted at the Okoro Global Headquarters, now rebuilt into a glass and steel masterpiece that overlooked the Lekki Peninsula. The theme of the evening was not wealth, but legacy through character. Distinguished guests from across Africa were present. Governors, business moguls, diplomats, religious leaders, and former staff who had been impacted by Chaik's journey. But the highlight of the evening was the unveiling of a new wing in the corporate complex, the Chaik Okoro Integrity Center, a place dedicated to training young leaders in ethics, business, and servant leadership. At the unveiling, Chief Dominic, now frail but standing strong, took the podium and delivered what would be his final public speech. "I once thought inheritance was blood," he said slowly, "but life taught me it is behavior. And this young man beside me, he didn't just inherit my wealth. He inherited my values." The crowd rose in a standing ovation, some with tears in their eyes. Chaik stepped up next, dressed simply in a native agbada, and began his speech with the words, "I am the son of mercy." He told his story from the streets of Ojulegba to the palace of Lekki, not to glorify himself, but to inspire others that humility was not weakness, and that loyalty was a currency more powerful than gold. "I cleaned shoes for 10 naira, he said, "but I never allowed bitterness to clean out my heart. Today, I stand here not as a king, but as a steward. This empire is not mine, it is ours, built by many hands, including the ones that once pushed me aside." His message was powerful, sincere, and unforgettable. At the end, he invited his former brothers to stand with him on the stage. "We may have fallen apart," he said, "but the best way to build a strong house is to restore even the broken bricks." The three brothers, Raymond, Felix, and Junior, stood awkwardly at first, overwhelmed by the grace they didn't deserve. But when Chaik embraced them one by one, murmuring, "I forgive you," the crowd cheered again. It wasn't just business success Chaik had achieved, it was moral victory. He didn't need revenge to rise. He didn't need to destroy anyone to prove his worth. He simply stayed true to the man who raised him and to the values he believed in. As the night closed with fireworks and prayers, Chief Dominic pulled Chaik aside and handed him a sealed envelope. "This was supposed to be opened only after my real death," he said. Chaik opened it later that night. It was a handwritten letter from Chief's late wife, written years ago, blessing him. "Chaik, if you're reading this, it means your heart led you here. Take care of Dominic. Take care of an aim. I already know you're the son I would have prayed for." Tears rolled down Chaik's cheeks as he sat on the balcony of the mansion that was once his prison, now his palace. The stars blinked above as if heaven itself smiled down on him. He looked out over the estate, the quiet, the gardens, the new buildings, the peace, and he whispered, "I did it, Mama. I did it, Papa. And I will keep doing it." In a world where blood had failed and pride had fallen, love, humility, and honor had triumphed. The man who was once mocked as a servant had become the master of legacy. And in the quiet corners of his heart, where pain once lived, now dwelled something far greater, purpose. Chaik didn't just carry the Okoro name anymore. He was the Okoro name. And with every breath he took, every decision he made, and every life he touched, he proved he was not just an heir. He was a true son. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.